You instantly and accurately judge someone's character without even knowing it. You also predict the future daily. Your brain is doing things you never asked it to do, then you are better for it. From the fact that it can make you build muscle just by thinking about exercise, to hallucinating without drugs, your mind is an infinite and incredible thing. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 bizarre things the human mind can do. 25. You accurately judge people's character in less than a second. The second you meet someone new, your brain pulls up a perfect profile on them, and it's usually spot on. Stanford researchers asked volunteers to watch teachers online with the sound off for a few seconds, then rate their characteristics like competence, confidence, and honesty. Their quick calls matched the teacher's actual end-of-semester evaluations. The same thing happened with judgments about sexuality, political leaning, and even general success. Other experiments pushed it a bit further and found that a 1-second look at political candidates was more or less enough to predict which ones would win their elections and by how much. Scientists aren't sure how we pick up on these signals, because the cues come from an overall body pattern that's impossible to fake on purpose. The weirdest bit was that the accuracy started failing the moment the volunteers started thinking about it. So our eventual overthinking messes with the accurate assumptions we make about people in the split second we meet them. 24. Predict the future. When you look at something, there is a tiny delay before that information reaches the brain, so your mind fills the gap by predicting what's about to happen next. Researchers tested this by tracking how people watched moving objects, and they found that the brain uses past behavior, like the path of a ball, to make a quick forecast of the next moment. The older you get, the better this prediction system becomes, because your brain has more experience to work with. So, in a way, you are always looking a fraction of a second into the future, and it's one of the reasons you don't walk into polls or clip the corner of a table. Most of the time, anyway. 23. Listen and learn while you're asleep. Parts of the brain never switch off, and scientists now know that those parts can actually keep on learning after you've fallen asleep. In one study published in Nature Communications, researchers put 20 volunteers to sleep and played repeating sound patterns during different stages of the sleep cycle. When the volunteers woke up, they were asked to pick out the same patterns again. The only ones they recognized were the sounds played during REM sleep. Anything played during the deeper stages might as well have never happened. It's not enough to help you pass your next exam by playing a textbook recording next to your pillow, sadly, but it is fascinating nonetheless. 22. Learn to play piano with imaginary practice. Most skills demand real practice, and there is no skipping hard work. Piano, however, seems to be the exception. Researchers have found that imagining yourself practicing the piano can trigger the same changes in the brain as actually touching the keys. One of the earliest suggestions came from Santiago Ramon y Cajal, the father of modern neuroscience. In 1904, he taught two groups of complete beginners a simple piano pattern. One group practiced on a real piano, while the other only pictured the movements and listened to the notes. When the experiment ended, both groups played the sequence at nearly the same level. The idea sounded far-fetched at the time, so researchers revisited it in the 90s with brain mapping tools and found the same thing. The imagined practice produced the same neural activity as the hands-on practice. 21. Sense the Earth's magnetic field. Animals use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate, and for years scientists assumed that we humans were the odd ones out. I mean, if we had anything close to that ability, we probably wouldn't have spent centuries getting lost on land and sea. But new research suggests we may have a small version of it hidden in the background. Scientists put 84 people inside a Faraday cage, which blocks all outside electromagnetic signals. They then created a controlled magnetic field, slowly shifted its direction, and monitored the volunteers' brain activity. Every single person in the test's brain lit up when the field moved the way it naturally would outdoors, and it only lit up when they aligned with the magnetic directions found in nature. For example, the brain didn't respond when the field pointed upward. That means we all have this sense, and that it's tuned specifically to the Earth's magnetic field and not to magnets in general. 20. Autopilot Mode. We all have those days where doing things on autopilot sounds like a dream. The truth is, your brain already does that once you get good at something. As soon as a task becomes familiar, the brain moves it over to a region called the default mode network, which handles automatic routines like tying your shoes or unlocking a car without thinking. Researchers watched this happen as people learned a simple card game. At first, the brain worked hard and stayed fully engaged. Once the players got the hang of it, the job shifted to the default mode network, and everything got faster and more accurate. This is why skilled tasks, like playing an instrument, falls apart when you overthink them. Once your brain learns the pattern, it handles the routine without asking for your input. 19. It's a natural alarm clock. As annoying as it can be at 6 in the morning on a Saturday, if you stick to a regular sleep schedule, your brain will build its own internal wake-up timer. It happens because your body starts releasing stress hormones a few hours before your normal wake-up time. It's part of your circadian rhythm and ties into genes that control your sleep-wake cycle. As those hormone levels rise, your heart rate picks up and your brain starts drifting toward wakefulness. Maintain a fixed bedtime and wake-up time, and the system starts running on its own. 18. 360-degree awareness. People love saying they just know when someone's behind them, but it's not mystical at all. Your eyes may only see forward, but your brain doesn't rely on your eyes alone. It constantly builds a three-dimensional snapshot of everything around you by combining sound, touch, slight shifts in air movement, and even the way footsteps bounce off nearby surfaces. Your hearing is especially good at picking up any changes coming from behind you, which helps your brain fill in the parts you can't see. Put all that together, and you end up with a rough, but surprisingly accurate, sense of what is happening in every direction. 17. Build muscles just by thinking about exercise. If thinking about working out counted as exercise, we would all have the perfect abs by now. But the idea isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. Researchers at Ohio University tested it by putting the wrists of 29 volunteers in casts so they couldn't move them. Half the group spent 11 minutes a day focusing on flexing those immobilized wrist muscles in their mind, and the other half did nothing at all. After a few weeks, the group that only imagined the exercise ended up with muscles almost twice as strong as the others. And it's not the only study to show it. Mental training seems to activate some of the same pathways your muscles use during real workouts. Does this mean you can daydream yourself into a six-pack? Probably not. But you can definitely get stronger without doing much more than sitting still. 16. Remember things that never happened. Memory is one of the strangest things our brain does. We still don't know how exactly memories are stored or why some stick while others disappear. But what we do know is that the brain can create memories out of thin air. And sometimes they're a lot more serious than a forgotten meeting or an argument that never happened. Researchers have shown time and time again that simple interview techniques can get volunteers to remember crimes they never committed, including theft and assault. And yes, it happens in real life too. Why the brain can fool itself this convincingly is still a mystery. It seems to plug holes in our memory whether the information is correct or not. 15. Have out-of-body experiences. I know, this kind of topic usually gets lumped in with late-night radio stories, but every now and then, science bumps into someone who actually has them on command. I kid you not. One notable time this happened was at the University of Ottawa in 2012 when a psychology student told her professors she could leave her body whenever she wanted. She said she'd been doing it since preschool and used it as a way to fall asleep. Her professors were skeptical until they put her in an MRI and watched what happened. When she triggered one of her episodes, her visual cortex quieted down instead of acting like it usually does during imagination. The right side of her brain stayed mostly silent too, which is unusual because both sides usually work together when we picture things. The researchers think she's having a type of harmless hallucination, something closer to dreaming while awake. It might even be something more common in childhood that only a few people continue into adulthood. She certainly thought it was normal. In her words, "I thought everybody could do that." 14. Share a consciousness. Krista and Tatiana Hogan are craniopagus twins, meaning they are physically connected at the head. The condition is extremely rare, and most children with it do not survive. But these two not only survived, they grew up with something no one expected. A neurosurgeon studying them discovered what he calls a thalamic bridge, a literal connection between the girl's thalami, the part of the brain that handles sensory information and plays a major role in consciousness. Because of that bridge, the twins seem to share parts of their sensory world. For example, one doctor covered Krista's eyes, shined a light into Tatiana's, and watched Krista's brain react as if she were the one seeing it. There are stories of one girl laughing at something on the TV the other is watching, or tasting something the other is eating. There are even times when they use the word "I" to refer to both of them at once. There is still a lot we do not know about their connection, but the evidence suggests they really can experience parts of each other's world. 13. Get fooled by an Echoborg. Experiments over the last few years have shown that we are surprisingly bad at noticing when someone isn't actually speaking for themselves. Researchers at the London School of Economics tested this using cyranoids and Echoborgs, real people who repeat lines fed to them through an earpiece. In one case, an 11-year-old boy repeated answers from a researcher during a formal interview. The panel walked away thinking he simply had a few eccentricities and a mental age of 15. Nobody guessed he was acting as someone else's mouthpiece. It got even stranger when the team replaced the human prompter with a chatbot. People still never picked up on it. Face to face, they simply believed the person in front of them just had an unusual way of talking. The idea that they were actually speaking to a computer never crossed their minds. 12. Turn "I smell good" into "I look good." Smelling good obviously helps your chances on a date. But the strange part is that simply believing you smell good can change how attractive you look. Researchers tested this by giving half a group of men a pleasant scent and the other half a completely odorless spray. They then filmed them and showed the clips to a group of women. The women obviously couldn't smell anything through the screen, yet the men who believed they smell good were rated as more attractive. The only thing that changed was confidence. When you feel good about yourself, it shows in how you move, talk, and carry yourself, and people pick up on it without knowing why. 11. Hack itself through exercise. Brain training apps promise you the world, but your mind gets a bigger boost from something a lot simpler. Different types of exercise fire up different parts of your brain, which means you can actually sharpen specific mental skills by choosing the right kind of workout. Aerobic stuff boosts memory and focus. Strength training helps with self-control and long-term thinking, and anything rhythmic or flowing tends to crank up creativity. None of it requires fancy fitness devices, just a decent pair of shoes and a bit of space. 10. Experience bullet time. Before The Matrix turned bullet time into unforgettable special effects, people were already reporting real moments where the world suddenly slowed to a crawl. One of the strangest cases involved a man named Simon Baker. He stepped into the shower with a horrible headache, and right as the pain peaked, the water in front of him seemed to freeze. He said the droplets hung in the air and moved so slowly he could watch their shapes distort as they fell. Doctors later found out that he had suffered an aneurysm, and it temporarily wiped out his normal sense of passing time. Neurologists say they've heard versions of this effect from a variety of patients after seizures, strokes, or other timing injuries in the brain. Sometimes the visual's slow, while the sound doesn't. Other times, everything looks normal, but people's voices stretch out. When the brain's timing gets thrown off, nothing lines up the way it should. The mechanics behind it are still a mystery, but all we know is that you could actually wake up one day and have the ability to see flying bullets. 9. Go all conspiracy theorist on too little sleep. A new study has shown that your brain becomes easier to fool when you're tired. The results were scarier than anyone expected. Researchers tested over 1,000 people in 2 experiments. First, they had everyone complete a sleep questionnaire, then read an article about the Notre Dame fire. Some participants got the regular version, while others got an extra conspiracy narrative added in. The sleep-deprived group was far more likely to accept the conspiracy without pushing back. In the second part, the team tried to figure out what was driving this shift and found that the key factor was not paranoia, but the emotional drag that comes with lack of sleep, insomnia, and depression. With too little rest, the brain's filter just doesn't do its job, and even questionable claims start sounding more believable than they should. 8. Distort your sense of size and space. Alice in Wonderland syndrome is one of the strangest things the brain can throw at a person. It makes your sense of size and distance go completely off the rails. People describe their hands looking tiny, or a hallway stretching out like it's suddenly doubled in length. Some even feel like their own body has changed size. It's rare, only about 170 known cases, but a new study from 2024 scanned people with the condition and compared them to people without it. Over 85% had lesions in 2 very specific areas of the brain, the region that handles visual information and the one responsible for judging size. When those 2 misfire together, the outcome can be very confusing. 7. Share brain cells. Marmoset twins actually trade stem cells in the womb, and some of those cells end up becoming brain cells. Harvard researchers found that as these twins develop, their shared blood supply lets stem cells drift from one fetus to the other. In marmosets, this swapping is so intense that up to 80% of their blood cells can come from their siblings. The most incredible part is that the borrowed cells sometimes develop into microglia, the brain's cleanup and repair crew. So, a marmoset can literally walk around with parts of its twin inside its nervous system. And since the same swapping process exists in humans, scientists think it could be happening with human twins too. 6. Live in the past. Retrocognition is the idea that someone can somehow see events from the past they couldn't possibly know about. It sits in the same camp as precognition, which is basically the kind of thing that's interesting to talk about, but not something scientists take seriously. The most famous example comes from 1901, when Charlotte Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were walking through the gardens at Versailles. They later claimed they suddenly saw people and buildings that supposedly belonged to a much earlier period. They even said a map from the 1700s matched what they saw. Skeptics have pointed out that they could have picked up those details without realizing it, or pieced them together from something they'd seen before. And since there's no controlled way to test retrocognition, it's something that's still mostly being treated as a good ghost story topic. 5. Hallucinate without drugs. You don't need anything illegal to get your brain to hallucinate. A 19th century physiologist accidentally discovered that sunlight alone can push your visual system into some pretty strange territory. Close your eyes, face the sun, cover one eye with your hand, and slowly sweep your other hand back and forth across your field of view. After a few seconds, your brain starts generating its own patterns. Some people get spirals, others get grids or bright geometric shapes, and the design usually changes as the light pulses through your eyelids. There's another method that relies on sensory overload rather than sunlight. Cover your eyes with a sheet of white paper, lie under strong white light, and block out sound with noise-canceling headphones. Give it about 20 minutes. When you sit up, your brain fills the blank space with whatever visuals it decides to cook up. 4. Use gestures to prepare for a test. There's no shortage of study tips out there, from rewriting notes to drawing pictures. Most of it works for some, and not for others, which is why students keep looking for a method that consistently helps the brain hang on to information. One approach actually has solid research behind it, and it's a lot simpler than color-coding your doodles. Simply raise your hands. Researchers have found that when students gesture while explaining a concept to themselves, the brain locks in the information far more effectively than reading aloud or taking extra notes. In one experiment, people who only talked themselves through a problem remembered almost nothing. The group that added gestures, though, showed a clear boost in understanding and recall. Moving your hands seems to engage extra areas of the brain that stay quiet during normal studying, and that extra activity gives the material a much better chance of sticking. 3. Claim a fake limb. People usually hear about phantom limbs in the context of amputations because a lot of amputees continue to feel their missing limbs after they're gone. What gets far less attention is that your brain can be fooled in a similar way with the limbs you still have. During one experiment, volunteers rested both arms on a table while holding their right hand inside a box. A rubber hand was placed on top of that box, and scientists lined up so perfectly with the volunteer's shoulder that it looked like it belonged there. Only the fake fingertips were showing. The researchers then brushed the hidden real hand and the rubber one at the same time. After a bit of synchronized stroking, the volunteers started feeling the touch on the fake hand instead of their own. Their brains simply reassigned ownership. 2. Match your emotions to your face. We usually chalk up a smile to good company, a joke, or a familiar face. But your brain reads that expression as an instruction, not a reaction. Researchers have tracked increases in dopamine and serotonin when people smile on cue, even when they're not feeling upbeat at all. Blood pressure dips, stress levels ease off, and the body shifts into a calmer state. So, you can literally fake smile yourself out of a bad mood. 1. Let sight rewrite sound. Listening isn't just about your ears. Your brain constantly checks what you hear against whatever your eyes pick up, and sometimes that mix and match approach scrambles the message. For instance, when someone says ba, but their mouth moves like they're saying ga, your brain doesn't choose one sense over the other. It fuses them and hands you something closer to da. Closing your eyes removes the conflict and the sound snaps back to normal. This effect appears in every language where it's been tested, even on infants that are only a few months old, and even shows up when the voice and face belong to different people. The effect holds up even when you know it's coming, which means your brain keeps rewriting the sound no matter how prepared you are, which says a lot about how strongly the brain leans on vision when it tries to make sense of speech. And that's where I'm going to stop myself today before we end up down some other rabbit hole. But you could always go down one on your own if you're interested. Our related video, 25 Mysterious Powers of the Human Mind, is the perfect next stop. It takes a deep dive into telepathy claims, odd sensory crossovers, strange feats of perception, and a bunch of things science is still poking at. The link for that video is going to show up right about here. And as always, thank you guys so much for everything. We really couldn't do this without you. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe with that notification bell, and I'll see you soon.